You know that moment of silence right before a truly terrible idea is born? That little pause where destiny hangs in the balance? This is a tribute to 10 people whose silence was followed by a symphony of failure. We're not just looking at outcomes. We're exploring the exact moment a human brain decided to wage war on common sense. Before we dive in, a quick ground rule. The stories you're about to see are real, with fatal results. This is a masterclass in what not to do. 1. The DIY veterinary procedure that ended with a final consultation is a story that serves as a powerful and frankly terrifying argument for leaving certain jobs to the professionals. Our scene is a vast, sun-scorched farm in rural Australia. Our protagonist is a farmer, a tough, no-nonsense kind of guy who believed in self-reliance above all else. His problem for the day was a common one in animal husbandry. He needed to castrate one of his young bulls. This is a routine procedure, but one that is usually handled by a trained veterinarian with proper tools, sedatives, and a deep understanding of how to not get killed by a half-ton animal. But our farmer looked at the potential vet bill, scoffed, and thought, "How hard can it be? I've got rope." His plan was a masterpiece of backyard engineering and breathtaking ignorance of animal psychology. He decided he would perform the procedure using nothing but a rope, a sturdy tree, and the bull's own momentum. He fashioned a loop in the rope, and after a considerable struggle, managed to get it securely around the bull's testicles. He then tied the other end of the rope to the base of a large, unmovable tree. His theory was simple. He would then scare the bull. The bull would run away from the scary thing, the rope would go taut, and the sudden violent jerk would… well, you get the picture. It would be a quick, efficient, and most importantly, free castration. He stood back, ready to put his brilliant plan into action. He waved his arms, shouted, and made a loud, scary noise. The bull, already annoyed at having a rope tied to its most sensitive parts, was not amused. It was startled, yes, but it didn't run away from him. It looked at the source of its pain and irritation, our farmer, and its brain, filled with pure bovine rage, made a very simple calculation. It was going to eliminate the problem. The bull didn't run away from the tree. It charged, directly at him. The farmer, who was probably expecting the bull to flee in the opposite direction, had just enough time to realize the fatal flaw in his plan. The bull, a half-ton missile of muscle and fury, closed the distance in an instant. The farmer's DIY veterinary career came to a swift, violent, and entirely predictable end. He had tried to save a few $100s by performing a delicate procedure with all the subtlety of a cartoon character. In the end, he learned a valuable lesson about animal behavior. When you cause an animal immense pain, it doesn't always run away. Sometimes it runs right through you. 2. The perfect revenge that sealed the wrong fate is a beautiful, ironic tragedy about a man whose master plan for petty revenge backfired in the most spectacular and claustrophobic way imaginable. Our story begins in a quiet apartment building, where a simmering feud between two neighbors was about to boil over. Our protagonist had had enough of his neighbor. Maybe it was loud music at 3 a.m. Maybe it was stolen parking spots. Maybe it was just a general clash of personalities. Whatever the reason, he decided it was time for retribution. He wasn't going to engage in a shouting match or leave a passive-aggressive note. His plan was far more creative, more permanent. He was going to glue his neighbor's front door shut. And he wasn't going to use some cheap craft store glue. Oh no. He acquired a tube of industrial-strength, quick-set epoxy, the kind of stuff they use to hold bridges together. This was a statement. This was a declaration of war. In the dead of night, he crept out into the hallway, his heart probably pounding with the thrill of his own cleverness. He carefully, methodically, applied the entire tube of epoxy around the frame of his neighbor's door, sealing every crack, every seam. He probably stood back to admire his work, a perfect, impenetrable barrier. His neighbor wouldn't be going anywhere for a while. Satisfied, he slipped back into his own apartment, a triumphant smirk on his face, and probably settled in to listen for the inevitable sounds of confused rage from next door. But fate, as it often does, had a dark sense of humor. Just minutes after he had completed his masterpiece of petty revenge, a fire broke out in his own apartment. Maybe it was a faulty wire, a forgotten candle, a piece of toast that went horribly wrong. The cause doesn't matter. What mattered was that his apartment was rapidly filling with thick, black, choking smoke. Panic set in. He had to get out, and fast. He stumbled through the smoke-filled rooms, his lungs burning, his eyes streaming, and made his way to his only escape route, his front door. He grabbed the handle, turned it, and pulled. Nothing. The door wouldn't budge. In his rage, in his focus on his neighbor, he had been sloppy. A thick glob of the industrial-strength, quick-set epoxy had dripped down from his neighbor's door and had seeped into the seam of his own, gluing it firmly, permanently, shut. He was trapped. The very weapon he had used to imprison his enemy had just become the seal on his own tomb. He probably spent his final, terrifying moments frantically pulling at a door that would not move, a prisoner of his own perfect crime. He had wanted to teach his neighbor a lesson about being trapped, and in the end, the lesson was all his. 3. The heist that was crushed by its own success is a masterpiece of criminal incompetence, a story that proves the importance of clear communication, especially when your plan involves dropping a very heavy object from a very high place. Our scene is a quiet street in Belgium in the dead of night. Two burglars, let's call them Luc and Pierre, have just pulled off a successful robbery of a third-story office. They bypassed the alarms. They picked the locks. They were masters of their craft. They found what they were looking for: a massive, old-fashioned cast-iron safe. It was probably filled with cash, jewels, priceless documents, the stuff of criminal dreams. But they immediately ran into a logistical problem. The safe weighed about as much as a small car. There was absolutely no way they could carry it down 3 flights of stairs without waking up the entire neighborhood and probably giving themselves a hernia in the process. They needed a new plan. And Luc, the brains of the operation, had a flash of genius. "We'll just drop it out the window," he whispered excitedly. "The concrete sidewalk will smash it open like a piggy bank. It's perfect." Pierre, the muscle, probably nodded in agreement. It sounded efficient. So, they hatched their new gravity-assisted plan. Luc would stay upstairs and push the safe out the window. Pierre would go downstairs, wait on the sidewalk below, and as soon as the safe smashed open, he would quickly scoop up the contents before anyone could react. It was a flawless plan, with only one tiny ambiguous instruction. "Go down and get ready to catch it," Luc probably said. And Pierre, not being the sharpest tool in the shed, took that instruction very, very literally. While Luc was upstairs, grunting and sweating, slowly wrestling the monstrously heavy safe towards the open window, Pierre was downstairs, getting into position. He wasn't standing at a safe distance. He was standing directly underneath the window, looking up, his arms outstretched, his knees bent in a perfect catcher's stance. He was ready to catch it. Up on the 3rd floor, Luc gave one final, mighty heave. The safe teetered on the windowsill for a moment, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky, and then it plunged. Luc peered out the window, a triumphant grin on his face, expecting to see a glorious explosion of splintered metal and scattered cash. What he saw instead was his partner, Pierre, looking up with a determined expression, perfectly positioned to intercept the falling object. And intercept it, he did. He caught it. Perfectly. With his skull, his spine, and his entire body. The safe landed with a sickening final thud, not on the concrete, but on his loyal and now very flat accomplice. The safe, of course, remained stubbornly locked. The plan had been a partial success. The safe was now on the ground floor. It had just had a much softer and much more final landing than anticipated. 4. The real-life video game leap that forgot to include a respawn button is a story that serves as a brutal, concrete-splattered reminder that physics doesn't grade on a curve, especially not in New York City. Our story features 2 friends, let's call them Leo and Mike, standing on the edge of a 9-story apartment building in the heart of the city. It was one of those perfect city nights, the air buzzing with energy, the streets below a glittering river of headlights and neon. From their vantage point, they felt like kings, masters of the concrete jungle stretching out before them. They weren't just looking at the view, they were looking at the gap. A chasm of about 10 feet separated their rooftop from the one next door. To a sane person, it was an impassable void, a guaranteed trip to the morgue. But to Leo, fueled by youthful arrogance and probably a few cheap beers, it was a challenge. It was a real-life level from a video game. "Dude, we could totally make that," he probably said, a confident smirk on his face. Mike, being the more sensible of the two, likely expressed some healthy skepticism. "Are you insane? That's 9 stories down." But Leo was persuasive. He was the leader, the one who always pushed the limits. He broke it down with flawless, idiotic logic. "It's all about the running start, man, momentum. It's just physics." He paced out the distance on his own rooftop, did a few practice runs, and declared it not just possible but easy. After minutes of goading and peer pressure, Mike reluctantly agreed to watch. Leo took his position, a look of pure, unshakable confidence in his eyes. He took a deep breath, and then he sprinted, his footsteps echoing on the gravelly roof. He launched himself into the air, a perfect, powerful leap, and landed with a solid thud on the other side, rolling to his feet like a seasoned parkour expert. He stood up, raised his arms in triumph, and yelled back across the chasm, "See, I told you, your turn." For Mike, watching from the other side, that single successful jump was the most dangerous thing that could have happened. It turned an insane idea into a proven concept. All his fear and doubt were suddenly replaced by a new, more powerful fear. The fear of looking like a coward. He took his position. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. He took a deep breath, trying to mimic Leo's confidence, and he ran. But his run wasn't as clean. There was a moment's hesitation, a fraction of a second where his brain screamed, "Stop!" And that hesitation was all it took. His launch was slightly off, his momentum just a little bit short. He didn't sail across the gap. He just reached the middle of it. His fingers scraped uselessly against the far ledge as he plummeted into the 9-story abyss, his friends' triumphant cheers turning into a horrified scream. He learned, in the most final way possible, that the biggest difference between a video game and real life isn't the graphics. It's the fact that in real life, there's no reset button. 5. The automotive campfire that solved all problems permanently is a story that comes to us from the icy depths of a Russian winter, a place where the cold doesn't just bite, it tries to kill you. Our hero is a man who woke up one morning to a problem familiar to anyone living in a frozen wasteland. His car wouldn't start. The engine block was frozen solid. The oil was probably the consistency of molasses. It was a classic case of man versus extreme cold. A normal person might try a block heater, a heated garage, or maybe just calling in sick and staying inside. But our hero was a man of action, a man who believed in direct, hands-on solutions. He wasn't going to let a little bit of frozen metal defeat him. He decided he would simply thaw it. His plan was a beautiful marriage of campfire logic and automotive ignorance. He would build a small, controlled fire directly underneath the engine's oil pan. The gentle, rising heat would warm the oil, thaw the block, and his car would roar back to life. It was a rustic, primal solution to a modern problem. So he gathered some kindling and a few small logs. He crawled under his car, the frozen ground, probably seeping into his clothes, and carefully arranged his little bonfire directly beneath the most vulnerable, flammable part of the entire engine. He struck a match and brought his creation to life. A tiny, cheerful flame began to lick at the frozen oil pan. At first, his plan seemed to be working. A gentle warmth began to spread. He probably lay there, admiring his handiwork, feeling like a genius, a true master of the elements. But he had failed to account for a few crucial details. First, oil, even when cold, is highly flammable. Second, cars are filled with a veritable cocktail of other flammable liquids: gasoline, transmission fluid, brake fluid. And third, cars have a lot of plastic and rubber parts that really enjoy catching on fire. The gentle, controlled fire quickly found a stray drop of oil. Then it found a rubber hose. Suddenly, it wasn't a small campfire anymore. It was a growing, angry inferno. The flames spread with terrifying speed, engulfing the entire engine compartment. Our hero probably scrambled out from under the car just in time to see his trusty Lada turning into a giant, four-wheeled barbecue. The tires began to melt. The paint began to bubble and peel. He stood there, helpless, watching his brilliant idea go up in smoke. But the grand finale was yet to come. The fire reached the fuel tank. With a deafening, window-rattling boom, the car exploded, sending a fireball and a shower of burning shrapnel across the snowy landscape. When the smoke cleared, there wasn't much left but a blackened, twisted metal skeleton. He had, in a way, been successful. He had solved the problem of his frozen engine block. He had also simultaneously solved the problems of his flat tire, his squeaky brakes, and that weird rattle coming from the exhaust. He had solved every single one of his car-related problems permanently. 6. The kiss of life that brought a fatal surprise is a heartwarming and then horrifying story about a man whose compassion was only matched by his profound ignorance of basic zoology. Our scene is a sunny backyard in Florida, where a kind-hearted man is enjoying a peaceful afternoon by his swimming pool. As he gazes at the crystal-clear water, he spots a tragic sight. A small, furry creature is floating motionless in the deep end. It's a possum. He immediately assumes the worst. The poor thing must have fallen in and drowned. His heart filled with a surge of heroic empathy. He wasn't going to let this innocent creature die on his watch. He grabbed his pool skimmer and carefully, gently, fished the limp, furry body out of the water. He laid the possum on the warm concrete of the pool deck. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. But our hero was not a quitter. He had seen it done in movies. He knew what to do. He was going to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on a wild possum. He knelt down, tilted the possum's head back, pinched its little nose, and sealed his lips over its mouth, beginning to breathe life back into what he thought was a tragic victim. What this compassionate, well-intentioned man failed to recall is the single most famous, most universally known trait of possums. They play dead. It's their signature move, their A-list defense mechanism. They are the masters of feigning death to avoid predators. The possum wasn't drowned. It was just giving the performance of a lifetime. And then, a strange, warm puff of air suddenly filled its lungs. It was violently, shockingly, startled awake from its fake death by the most unwanted, intimate contact it had ever experienced. Its survival instincts kicked in with a vengeance. It didn't wake up slowly. It exploded into a whirlwind of claws and teeth. And before our hero could even react, the possum bit him, squarely on the lip, the very same lips that had just been trying to save its life. The man recoiled in shock and pain. A heroic rescue mission suddenly turned into a bloody, chaotic mess. He managed to shoo the possum away, which probably scurried off into the bushes, deeply traumatized. The man cleaned his wound, but didn't think much of it. It was a small bite, after all. But the possum had left him a little parting gift: rabies. The subsequent infection was untreatable and 100% fatal. His act of kindness was repaid with a definitive and agonizing lesson in marsupial defense mechanisms. He had tried to be a hero, but ended up a tragic footnote in the long, strange history of human-animal misunderstandings. 7. The great snake hunt that missed its target but found a new doorway is a classic tale of man versus reptile, a story that proves the best-laid plans can often go crashing through your own living room wall. Our story unfolds in a quiet, suburban garage in Arizona, a place that is usually home to cars, lawnmowers, and forgotten Christmas decorations. But on this day, it was home to a new, uninvited guest: a large, very angry rattlesnake. Our homeowner, upon discovering this venomous intruder coiled menacingly in the corner, had a perfectly normal reaction: pure, unadulterated panic. He needed to get rid of it, and fast. Now, a rational person might call animal control. A brave person might try to shoo it out with a long broom. But our hero, in his moment of fear, had an idea that was anything but rational. He decided that the best, most efficient way to deal with a single, relatively small snake was to run it over. with his car. His plan was a beautiful symphony of overkill and poor judgment. He would get in his car, which was parked in the driveway, and use its 2 tons of steel and rubber to deliver a swift, decisive, and very flat end to the snake's existence. He ran out of the garage, leaving the door open, his heart probably pounding with a mix of terror and righteous fury. He jumped into his car, fired up the engine, and took a deep breath. This was it. He was going to reclaim his territory. He slammed the car into drive and hit the accelerator, not gently, but with the full force of a drag racer launching off the starting line. He shot into the garage at a speed that was wildly inappropriate for a small, enclosed space. He was a blur of motion, his eyes locked on the corner where the snake had been. But snakes, especially startled ones, are not stationary targets. The rattlesnake, hearing the roar of an engine and seeing a giant metal monster hurtling towards it, did what any sensible creature would do. It moved. It slithered out of the way just as the car screamed past. Our hero, so focused on his target, didn't even notice he had missed. He was still pressing the accelerator, expecting the satisfying thump of a successful hunt. But the thump never came. What came instead was the sound of splintering wood, shattering drywall, and breaking glass. He shot straight through the back wall of his own garage without even slowing down, crashing catastrophically into his own living room. The car came to a stop amidst a cloud of dust and debris, its front end buried in what used to be his television stand. The snake, still in the garage and completely unharmed, probably watched the whole thing with a sense of reptilian bewilderment before quietly slithering away. The man did not survive the crash. He had tried to solve a small snake problem with a 2-ton solution, and in the process had created a much bigger problem for himself, and a brand new, very convenient drive-through window for his house. 8. The Arachnophobe Who Chose the Wrong Time to Abandon Ship is a tragicomedy about a woman whose fear of spiders was so powerful, so all-consuming, that it led her to make a decision that was infinitely more dangerous than the spider itself. Our scene is a busy motorway in England. Our protagonist is a woman who, by all accounts, was a perfectly normal, responsible driver. But she had a secret, a deep, dark phobia that she carried with her everywhere she went. She was terrified of spiders, not just a mild dislike. We're talking full-blown, scream at the top of your lungs, lose all rational thought arachnophobia. On this particular day, she was cruising along at a steady 60 miles per hour, probably listening to the radio, thinking about her day, when her worst nightmare materialized. A spider. A small, harmless one, most likely, but in her mind, it was a hairy, 8-legged monster from the depths of hell. And it wasn't on the outside of the car. It was inside, with her. It dropped down from the sun visor and dangled right in front of her face. Her brain, completely hijacked by her phobia, bypassed every single rational thought process. It didn't think, pull over safely. It didn't think, flick it away. It screamed one single overriding command: abandon ship. In a moment of pure instinctual panic, while traveling at highway speeds surrounded by other cars, she decided the driver's seat was no longer a safe place to be. She unbuckled her seatbelt, and with the agility of a terrified cat, she leaped from the driver's seat into the back of the car, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the tiny arachnid. The car, now without a driver, was a 2-ton metal missile with no guidance system. It continued forward for a moment, and then, as the wheel drifted, it began to swerve. It veered sharply across 3 lanes of busy traffic, other drivers slamming on their brakes and swerving wildly to avoid the ghost car. Her final journey was a chaotic, terrifying ballet of near misses before the car finally, inevitably, crashed into the central median barrier. She did not survive. She had been so terrified of a creature that posed absolutely no threat to her that she had created a situation that was 100% fatal. In a twisted, dark turn of irony, her extreme phobia had ensured that she would never have to worry about spiders or anything else ever again. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the fear itself is far more dangerous than the thing you're afraid of. 9. The Cryogenically Frozen Cat That Delivered a Fiery Farewell is a story about love, loss, and the unforeseen dangers of trying to cheat death with high-tech and highly flammable equipment. Our story begins in Russia with a woman whose love for her cat, let's call him Mishka, was boundless. Mishka wasn't just a pet. He was her soulmate, her furry confidant, her reason for getting up in the morning. So when Mishka passed away from old age, she was utterly heartbroken. She couldn't bear the thought of a traditional burial. It was too final. She wanted a second chance. After some frantic online research, she discovered a solution that seemed to be straight out of a science fiction movie: cryogenics. She found a company that promised to cryogenically freeze her beloved Mishka, preserving him in a state of suspended animation with the hope that future technology could one day bring him back. It was an expensive, unconventional choice, but for her, no price was too high to pay for the possibility of seeing her furry friend again. So, Mishka was sent off and returned as a cryo patient, housed in a sleek, high-tech cryogenic preservation unit. It was a large, humming, liquid, nitrogen-filled pod that looked like a prop from an alien movie. She installed it in her living room, a gleaming, futuristic shrine to her undying love for her cat. She would talk to it, polish it, and dream of the day she could finally reunite with her beloved pet. She probably felt a sense of peace, knowing that Mishka was safe, just sleeping. But what she didn't fully appreciate was that this unit wasn't just a fancy cat coffin. It was a complex piece of machinery, filled with highly pressurized liquid nitrogen and a web of electronics, all working together to maintain an incredibly low temperature. One night, while she was sleeping, a small, unnoticed electrical fault occurred within the unit. A wire frayed, a circuit shorted, and a tiny spark was born in the heart of the machine. This tiny spark ignited some of the unit's plastic components. The fire started small, a quiet, smoldering burn inside the high-tech pod. But it grew, feeding on the flammable materials, heating the liquid nitrogen inside. As the liquid nitrogen heated, it expanded, creating an immense, unstoppable amount of pressure within the sealed container. The sleek, futuristic pod began to groan and bulge. It was no longer a preservation unit. It had become a bomb. The unit finally failed catastrophically, exploding with a massive, fiery blast that tore through her apartment. The fire spread rapidly, engulfing the room in flames. Our loving pet owner was killed in the blaze, a tragic victim of the very machine she had trusted to preserve the thing she loved most. In her desperate attempt to defy the finality of death for her cat, she had inadvertently accelerated her own. Mishka, her frozen companion, remained perfectly preserved inside the now-wrecked, fire-blackened pod, a silent, icy testament to a love story that had gone horribly, explosively wrong. 10. The Submarine Technician Who Brought His Work Home with Him is a powerful story about the dangers of overconfidence, and a grim reminder that just because you know how to work on a nuclear submarine doesn't mean you should mess with your home's water heater. Our hero is a man in Russia, a former submarine technician, a guy who had spent his career working with high-pressure systems, complex plumbing, and things that go boom if you turn the wrong valve. He was a man who understood pressure, or so he thought. One day, the hot water heater in his apartment building started acting up. It was making strange noises, the pressure was fluctuating. It was clearly on its last legs. The building manager probably called for a plumber, but our hero, with his impressive submarine resume, scoffed at the idea. A plumber? For a simple water tank? I've worked on nuclear reactors. I can handle this. He went down to the building's basement, took one look at the faulty water heater, and immediately diagnosed the problem. He saw that the pressure release valve, a safety feature designed to vent excess steam and prevent the tank from exploding, was leaking slightly. To a plumber, this is a sign that the valve needs to be replaced. To our submarine technician, it was a sign of a faulty, unnecessary part that was compromising the system's integrity. In his mind, the system should be perfectly sealed, just like on a submarine. So he made a decision that was both technically proficient and catastrophically stupid. He decided to fix the safety valve by removing it from the equation entirely. He got his welding gear and, with the skilled hand of a seasoned technician, he permanently sealed the pressure release valve shut. He probably stood back, admiring his handiwork, a perfect, impenetrable weld. He had fixed the leak. He had made the system stronger. He went back upstairs, proud of his handiwork, and completely unaware that he had just armed a massive bomb directly beneath his own apartment. Over the next few hours, the water heater continued to do its job, heating the water inside. But now, as the water turned to steam, the immense pressure had nowhere to go. The sealed tank began to strain, the metal groaning and stretching under the incredible, ever-increasing force. It was a silent, ticking time bomb. And then, it went off. The water heater exploded with the force of several sticks of dynamite. The blast was so powerful it turned the massive steel tank into a rocket. It launched itself upwards, shooting through the concrete floor of the first story, then the second, then the third, before finally coming to rest in a mangled heap, having ripped a giant, gaping hole through the entire building. Our hero, who was likely enjoying a cup of tea in his apartment, was killed instantly in the massive explosion. He had applied his submarine logic to a domestic appliance, and in doing so, had turned his home into a torpedo tube, with his own apartment as the target. Let's be real. Every one of these stories was fueled by a single powerful human emotion. Some by ego, some by frustration, some by pure, uncut laziness. So here's the debate. Which emotion is the most dangerous? Which one is the ultimate shortcut to a Darwin Award? I want to see your theories backed by evidence from today's video in the comments. If you made it this far without questioning your own past decisions, you've earned a like. Subscribe, because the supply of bad ideas is, thankfully for us, endless.